An old-fashioned two-story house stands in a calm residential neighborhood, a little way from the bustle of New York. Its white-painted wooden exterior shows some fade, which is a result of the years of weathering. Wheelchair access is provided by a ramp at the front door. Up until a fatal day, my mother-in-law, Dolly, and I, Julia Brown, lived in peace in this house. Avoid getting involved in matters that don't affect you. Leave if you are unable to give me your entire pay. My life completely changed when my sister-in-law Marlene said these startling words. What? I was so surprised that my voice was hoarse. Marlene went on with a victorious expression. You are merely an outsider, and I am the daughter of this household. If you give me your paycheck each month, I'll let you stay. Leave if you don't like that. Her remarks left me stunned. It was ridiculous that my sister-in-law, who did nothing except play about, would say such things to me after I had been providing my mother-in-law with loving care for 10 years. I felt a whirl of anger, despair, and profound disappointment. I can still clearly recall the day I arrived at this house 20 years ago and got married to Russell. I was a 28-year-old Italian student who had just moved to the United States. I was graciously accepted by Russell, and after we were married, he and his mother Dolly moved in together. Living with Dolly was a result of Russell's filial devotion because he couldn't leave his mother alone when his father went away. I was nervous at first. It was intimidating to live abroad with a mother-in-law who was from a different culture and spoke a different language. But Dolly always greeted me with a smile, as if she could sense my nervousness. Julia, adjusting to life in America must be difficult. Never be afraid to seek for help when you need it, she would advise. Dolly taught me about American culture and traditions, while also assisting me with my English studies. Her generosity and kindness gradually warmed my heart. She carefully taught me how to cook and take care of the house. Dolly carefully walked me through each step as she demonstrated how to prepare an American-style breakfast and how to properly cook a turkey for Thanksgiving. Julia, your soup tastes so good, she would ask. Could you show me how to make it? I was delighted when Dolly said such things. Naturally, we developed a bond in which we appreciated and gained knowledge from one another's cultures. Luckily, we got along great, and Dolly was a really nice person. She became like a true mother to me, even though we were not blood relatives. But 10 years ago, when Dolly abruptly passed out, everything changed. She was lying on the floor in the living room one day when I got home from work. I almost freaked out, but I kept my cool and called for an ambulance right away. A stroke was the hospital's diagnosis. She was fortunate to live, although her right half of the body was paralyzed. My mind went numb as the doctor described the necessity of regular help and long-term recovery. Your mother-in-law will require long-term rehabilitation, Mrs. Brown. Additionally, she will require assistance with her everyday tasks, the physician stated. I nodded as the doctor finished speaking. I made a clear decision at that same time. I get it. I'll look after her. Russell concurred, and I resigned from my position to work from home as a freelancer in order to devote all of my time to taking care of Dolly. Taking care of her proved to be more difficult than I had anticipated. Every day was hectic with helping with meals, bathing, and taking her to therapy appointments, and at times I was completely worn out. However, Dolly's grin and words of gratitude made me feel better. Having lost my parents early, Dolly was like a real mother to me. That's why caregiving didn't feel like a burden. Rather, I viewed it as an opportunity to give back. 3 years ago, our family faced another trial. It was a chilly, rainy day. As I was preparing breakfast like usual, the phone rang abruptly. Mrs. Brown, I'm sorry to inform you. Your husband has been involved in a traffic accident. The moment I heard those words, it felt as if my world had stopped. I rushed to the hospital, but the news waiting for me was the worst possible. Russell had died at the scene of the accident. The suddenness of it all made it impossible for me to accept reality. overwhelmed by grief and despair, I couldn't stop crying for days. Dolly, too, was struck silent by the shock of losing her only son. Although her body was disabled, her mind was sharp. However, since the incident, she spent her days in a wheelchair, staring blankly out the window. I suppressed my own grief and devoted myself to caring for Dolly. I encouraged her to eat, talked to her, and did everything I could to help her regain some energy. I was determined to prevent her from deteriorating further, possibly into dementia. "Dolly, it's sunny today. Would you like to go outside for some fresh air?" I would suggest. Sometimes I'd take her out to the garden. We would sit on the garden bench, watching the roses that Russell had cherished, and spend quiet moments together. Occasionally, we would reminisce about Russell, shedding tears together. When Russell was little, he used to play in this garden a lot. He would climb that tree and shout, "Mom, watch me." Dolly's voice trembled, but gradually light returned to her eyes. I also shared memories of my husband. Just after we got married, Russell and I spread out a picnic set in this garden, drank wine under the stars, and he told me, "Julia, I am so happy to have met you." Through these conversations, we gradually began to heal, sharing our grief and supporting each other. We forged new bonds. For me, it was simple. Nothing changed in our relationship. I would continue to live here and take care of Dolly, as I had always done. But our peaceful days were about to be disrupted by a new turmoil. One day, there was an unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang, and when I opened the door, there stood Marlene, my late husband's sister and my sister-in-law. "Long time no see, Julia. Can I stay for a bit?" There was a forcefulness in Marlene's voice. I hesitated for a moment, but thought there was no reason to refuse, as she was family. So I invited her into the house. However, I had no idea that this decision would greatly change our lives. Marlene was exactly as my husband used to describe her, with a wry smile, saying, "She's much younger and has always been spoiled." Indeed, whenever she came back for New Year's or other occasions, she was very selfish and acted like a queen. Her selfishness was unbearable. Not only did she not help with caregiving, but she also did none of the cooking or chores. Yet she ate and drank as much as she liked without cleaning up. She would get drunk, sometimes hurling insults. It was futile to expect a word of thanks from her. Her usual behavior was beyond common sense. Knowing that I was busy with caregiving, she would suddenly drop off her child and go out to have fun. When she finally came to pick up her child, she would take home the food I had prepared without asking. Even though it was her parents' home, I thought she was taking too much liberty. One day, I gathered the courage to speak up to Marlene. "Marlene, I think it would be nice if we could all cooperate and live together. Could you help out a bit?" However, her response was unexpected. "What? You who can't even have children are just a useless freeloader. So, you should be doing all the housework to be useful. It's sad for Mom, who wanted grandchildren. That's why I bring my kids over." I was left speechless by her words. I couldn't believe that she could say such cruel things to me, knowing that I had desperately wanted children but couldn't have any. It was unbelievable that she was Dolly's gentle daughter. I realized that it was useless to say anything to her, so I decided not to respond anymore. We didn't meet very often, and I thought it would be better if I just endured it. While I wished to live peacefully, Marlene's visits became more and more frequent. One day, Dolly asked Marlene, "Marlene, why do you leave the children here so often and come back so late at night?" Marlene replied as if making an excuse, "I started a part-time job because I need more money for the children. Now you're happy to see your grandchildren, aren't you, Mom?" "Well, that's true," Dolly said, but she seemed unconvinced. The children were still young, yet she was working at night. I also wondered why she would need to work nights when she wasn't struggling financially, but I kept silent. Then, one day, as usual, Marlene suddenly visited. I thought she had come to drop off her children again, but this time she was alone. She came pulling a large travel suitcase, and just when I was wondering what was going on, she declared, "I've gotten a divorce, so I'm moving in here from today." Dolly and I were shocked and asked what she meant. Marlene, looking almost tearful, turned to Dolly and began, "Mom, the truth is, I've been suffering from domestic violence from my husband for a long time. I couldn't stand it anymore, so I decided to get a divorce." Dolly's face turned pale upon hearing these words. I was so surprised that I lost my words too. Marlene continued, "I wanted to bring the kids too, but my husband wouldn't allow it. He only agreed to the divorce on the condition that I leave the house alone." I was confused. I had met Marlene's husband a few times before, and he seemed calm and kind, not at all like someone who would commit violence. In fact, I had often seen Marlene yelling at her husband and children unreasonably. However, Dolly seemed to believe Marlene's words immediately. Hearing her daughter's suffering, she agreed to let her move in. "Julia, I'm sorry, but I can't abandon Marlene," Dolly apologized to me. While she said she was sorry, I understood. If a mother hears her daughter has been divorced and ousted, she couldn't just ignore it. With mixed feelings, I replied, "I understand. Thank you, Mom." "Julia, please be nice, okay?" Marlene, who had appeared to be crying earlier, now smirked with dry eyes. It seemed like it was all an act. And so, our life living with Marlene began. However, she continued to do nothing at all, just like before. She didn't help with her mother's care, nor did she do any cooking, laundry, or cleaning. Astonishingly, she did absolutely nothing. Moreover, her attitude toward me became increasingly arrogant. But I maintained my composure in front of Dolly. I didn't want to cause any unnecessary worry for my mother-in-law. One day, Dolly spoke to me. "Julia, there's a place I want to go. It's a bit difficult with the wheelchair, but could you come with me?" "Of course. Where would you like to go? Shall we stop by our favorite cafe? It's been a while." There was a cafe that had been our favorite since I married into the family. We used to go there often when Dolly was still healthy. "I also have something important to discuss, so that sounds good." I felt a slight unease at Dolly's words. When we arrived at the cafe, Dolly, checking around to ensure privacy, began speaking in a low voice. "Julia, I'm actually worried about something concerning Marlene." "What is it?" "She's been going out in the middle of the night and spending a lot of money. Something about her behavior seems off." A look of deep concern was evident on Dolly's face. "Also, about the divorce. Something doesn't seem right. I want to contact Marlene's ex-husband, but it's difficult for me." I was surprised by my mother-in-law's words. Dolly wasn't completely convinced by Marlene's story. "I understand. I'll look into it." From that day, I quietly but steadily began to investigate the truth. Several weeks later, I had uncovered the entire story. I contacted Marlene's ex-husband and met with him directly. His account was entirely different from Marlene's claims. Actually, Marlene had multiple affairs. I forgave her each time, trying to make things work. Sadness was evident in his eyes. In the end, Marlene left the house on her own. She even neglected the children. I was stunned. All of Marlene's stories were lies. As evidence, her ex-husband showed me exchanges of messages between Marlene and another man, along with hotel receipts. After learning everything, I told Dolly the truth. She appeared deeply hurt, yet there was also a look of resolve on her face. "Julia, thank you. There's something I must do." From that day, Dolly began closely communicating with a lawyer. She didn't share the details with me, but it seemed she was preparing something. At home, Marlene's attitude toward me became increasingly arrogant. "Hey, Make something more substantial. What's with this bland, all-veggie meal? Are you trying to annoy me? I'm making these meals low in salt, considering your mom's health, Marlene. You should cook what you like to eat. What? Don't order me around. You're just a freeloader. Freeloader. Besides, my brother is dead and you're practically a stranger now, right? Why are you still living in this house? Are you paying rent? If you have a salary, you should give it all to me. What? I was baffled by Marlene's words. It's ridiculous to keep a stranger in the house for free. You should be paying rent and utilities. Rent? I've been living here since I got married. We even paid for the renovations when we moved in, and all the utility bills. But the land and the house are ours. And now that my brother is gone, you can say whatever you want, right? Marlene's words hurt me deeply. I had devoted 10 years to caregiving for Dolly day and night. To be treated like this was unbearable. Who will take care of Dolly if I'm not here? Don't meddle in things that don't concern you. If you can't hand over your full salary to me, then leave. The moment these shocking words left my sister-in-law Marlene's mouth, my world turned upside down. What? And you have the nerve to say such awful things while I take care of everything around the house. But Marlene just scoffed at me, as if mocking my efforts. Isn't it natural to get money from someone who's not even family staying in the house? It's ridiculous how you act as if you're doing me a favor. You must really be after the inheritance. I understand. If that's how you feel, I'll leave. I couldn't believe that Marlene, who had no intention of taking care of her own mother, was serious. So I immediately called a nursing home, and it was decided that Dolly would move in there. As I moved out, Dolly's health seemed to decline. I visited her every day, cherishing the time I could spend with her. Though we were apart, I'm so sorry. Julia, I can't believe she kicked you out. I tried to tell her to reconsider, but she wouldn't listen. Dolly, don't worry about it. Just call me if you need anything. But the end came suddenly. One day, I received a call that Dolly had a seizure due to her chronic condition. I rushed to the facility, but Marlene was nowhere to be seen. Dolly, hang in there, I called out desperately. Dolly grasped my hand and spoke in a feeble voice. Julia, you really were a good daughter. Dolly, don't talk like that. We still have time to spend together, I said as tears overflowed from my eyes. It's okay. Everything is prepared. I believe in you, she whispered. With those words, Dolly quietly closed her eyes. Despite the doctor's best efforts, Dolly passed away. I regretted not being able to say a proper goodbye or express enough gratitude to her. I couldn't stop crying. A few days after Dolly's funeral, all the relatives gathered at the house where only Marlene now lived. It seemed Dolly had requested everyone's presence for the reading of her will. The lawyer she hired surveyed the room and began to explain. Before I read the will, at the deceased's request, she left a recorded message in her own voice. Please listen. Dolly's voice began to play, and everyone listened intently. Thank you all for gathering here. I appreciate the relationships we shared during my life. I will now speak about the distribution of my estate. While it's not a vast amount, I requested your presence to avoid any trouble. First, to my daughter Marlene, I leave $100,000. Although she did not contribute at all to caring for her parents, she has young children and has gone through a divorce. I hope she uses this for the children's needs and as alimony, so I leave her only the statutory portion. Marlene gasped in astonishment. What? Statutory portion? It's not everything? Whispers spread among the relatives. Marlene is divorced? She hasn't shown her face at family gatherings for years. Alimony? Aren't the kids with her? Wasn't Julia the one who cared for Dolly all by herself? Marlene, faced with the stares of all her relatives, turned red and trembled with clenched fists. The atmosphere was charged as the family digested the revelations of Dolly's final wishes and Marlene's true character. Dolly's voice continued. Those of you hearing about Marlene's divorce for the first time might be surprised. The cause was her infidelity. It would be one thing if she were neglecting my care to focus on her family, but she was neither looking after her children nor faithful, choosing to spend her time with her lover instead. Her husband caught her and divorced her, and she lost custody of the children. I truly do not want to leave Marlene a single penny, but knowing her, she would claim her rights. To avoid any trouble for the other heirs, I will leave her only half of the statutory share. I hope she uses it to properly pay off her marital obligations and that the remainder is used for the benefit of her children. There were gasps of surprise from the relatives, and Marlene's composure changed. Julia, thank you for coming into our family and for all your dedication over the years. I loved everything about you. It must have been so hard for you when Russell passed away so young. Yet you bravely stood by me and cared for me in our home. Tears streamed down my face. To Julia, I bequeath the same amount of $100,000, as well as our home and land. You are free to sell or rent the house, but I would be delighted if you remember the days we spent together there. Dolly, I only heard about the contents of the will just now, but I calmly responded. Moreover, Dolly knew about your divorce. She heard it directly from your ex-husband. Marlene's face turned pale. I continued. Your husband repeatedly tried to mend things for the sake of the children, despite your continuous affairs. Though your kind-hearted husband had no intention of demanding alimony, Dolly suggested that he should. The relatives' glances at Marlene were filled with disdain. Finally, I said, Also, it seems like you're upset about the inheritance I'm receiving, but you should know that I was legally adopted by Dolly. Legally, I am as much her child as you are. Marlene's face went ashen, and she collapsed on the spot. Applause rose from the relatives. Some were tearful. It's good to see you rewarded after all your years of caring for Dolly, one said. You seemed more like her real daughter than just a daughter-in-law, another added. If you ever need help, just call us, someone else offered. I bowed deeply. Thank you. It seemed Dolly had gathered everyone to ensure there were no misunderstandings or unwarranted rumors about the inheritance after I received it. Afterwards, Marlene left the house cursing. Although she had to pay alimony to her ex-husband from her share of the inheritance, it seemed her life afterwards was challenging. Now I am living leisurely, sorting through the belongings in the old house. The lawyer gave me the recording of Dolly reading her will. Thank you for everything. Truly, I have always loved your honesty and kindness. Just recalling Dolly's words brings tears to my eyes. I wonder if I was able to express my gratitude to her adequately. Caring for her wasn't something I thought of as caregiving. It was just natural to be together all the time. I wonder if she knew how I felt. Perhaps the contents of the will were her way of answering. If I keep crying, I worry that my husband in heaven and Dolly would be concerned about me. All right, today I'll go to that cafe for the first time in a while, I declared aloud. Arriving at the cafe, a familiar scent enveloped me, bringing back memories of the days I spent here with Dolly. Welcome, greeted a young waitress with a smile. Is it just one today? Yes, I responded, and unexpectedly, tears welled up in my eyes. Are you okay? The waitress asked, looking concerned. I'm sorry, I'm fine. I used to come here often with my mother-in-law. She has passed away now. I see. It must be a place full of memories for you and your mother-in-law, she said with a gentle smile. Yes, but it's my first time here alone. I understand, but I'm sure she's happy that you came to this special place, she reassured me. Her words made me feel a bit more encouraged. Thank you. Yes, I'm sure you're right, I said with a smile. Settling into my seat, I looked out the window from my table. The warm spring sunshine felt comforting, A new season was beginning.